Welcome to another episode of the Good Sugar Podcast, GSP as I like to call it. I am Ralph Sutton, back from not being here for a couple weeks. I apologize, Marcus. Saw a funny, not funny, but an insightful clip this morning on the TikTok, which stuck with me, where the key to being happy is learning when enough is enough. Like, you don't need to be a billionaire. You don't need to, whatever it is. Like, humanity, I think it's, especially in America, you're always looking at the other guy as opposed to just being happy with what you have. And when is enough enough? So just because you might have $100,000 in the bank, and then you look at a guy that has $1 million in the bank, and that makes you jealous. And the millionaire is looking at the billionaire and being jealous, or the guy with one kid versus the guy with two kids, or the guy with a business and the guy with two stores, whatever. You can always be striving for more, but there is a point where enough is enough.
Well, I would say to add to what you just said is that there's a simple word change that I would say, and not say that the key to happiness is that thing that you just said. I would say it's more of one of the keys. There's many keys to happiness.
I will agree with that.
There isn't just one thing, and we're all very, very different, and there's no two people that are alike. So there can't be just the key to success. You have to really learn what your key to success is, or what your key to happiness is.
I not only do I agree with that, but what I talk about this a lot lately. So I'm going to say we're going to do like an update on me this week, an update on our lives, etc. We don't have a guest this week. So lately, due to the fact that even though I don't think I look my best today, I hadn't slept so well these last couple of days because of taking care of my uncle. It's a side story. But I have been getting an influx of emails, really DMs more than anything else, of people saying that they've been following my journey here and online, and to losing weight, and to trying to be on a better path, not just physically but mentally, and blah blah blah, that they have found it inspiring. That when I started all this at 50 last year, now I'm 51, that if I could do it, why haven't they done it? And that I really appreciate those DMs that come in at I am Ralph Sutton. So it's very nice of you. But I have found myself taking lessons from this show and explaining them to other people just casually. For instance, yesterday I was at the bank, and these two tellers were discussing how to lose weight. And one was going to do keto, and one was going to be vegan, and one was going to do intermittent fasting. And what I take from all of these things is, you do something little, do something to start getting that forward momentum, instead of planning and never actually doing anything, or setting yourself up to fail, where you are doing some sort of crash crazy diet where you're going to lose 10 pounds in a week and then you'll gain back 12 pounds a week later. That's not going to work. You got to find something that's really going to be part of your life. And that leads me into what I wanted to talk about right at the top of the show. Was I started reading a book. I always say reading, but I mean listening to a book when I run, right? And I really like one of its metaphors. It was talking about, it's called Atomic Habits. I don't know if you ever read it, but what it talks about is, when you're trying to create positive habits, better life changes, right? Which is what I think most of us are trying to do. Get rid of your negative habits and increase your positive habits. I think that's what everybody could agree that's what they want to do, right? There's 3 layers to changing a habit. The easiest one is to just say, like, for instance, you're trying to not eat sweets. Someone orders a dessert. You don't order dessert. There you go, right? You're starting to change your habit. But that's not really what you do yet. It's not habitual. It's not something you always do. You just made a conscious effort to not order a dessert, right? The next level is when you're just don't eat dessert. You don't even think about it anymore. It's part of your lifestyle. You don't eat dessert. But then the last part, which is the hardest part to get to, is when it becomes part of your belief structure, when it's who you are. And the explanation that they gave that resonated with me was this. Let's say you're trying to quit smoking, trying to give up smoking. Someone offers you a cigarette, and your response is, I'm trying to quit. The other guy's response is, I don't smoke. That person has now made it part of their identity that they don't smoke. So that's why if you follow me on Instagram, yesterday I made this declaration. I am a runner. I have been denying that for a year, a little over a year. I would say, I don't know if I'm a runner. I don't like doing it. I just do it because it helps, and I've been losing weight and blah, blah, blah. But I decided, you know what? Screw it. I'm a runner. That's what I do now. I run 3 days a week. I'm running 25 miles a week. I'm a runner, and just embrace it. And once you make it part of your identity, it becomes more deeply embedded into who you are. How do you feel about that?
You know, I have about 7 books. I say about because there's probably 15 and books that I've written now that are being edited, and some of them are really messy, so I don't really count them as anything. But the 7 books that I have that are actually getting really shaped up to the point where I could publish them the way I did with the Good Sugar Diet book. The thing that I think about a lot is the mechanical action of how to take someone who's doing something destructive and teach them how to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Other than just obviously saying it, right? But by the way, could have an effect. Like, in other words, let's say you respect me a lot. You look up to me for this reason, that reason, and you're doing something destructive to yourself. And I say, stop doing that. It's wrong. Do it this way. That could be a catalyst for you to just stop.
Mm-hmm.
Not likely, because we have habits. So what I tend to do, and this approach is really not for everyone, is I really try to break down the root cause of how we get to certain behaviors. And what I realize is that a person to actually sit down and read this stuff or listen to it on a podcast or in an audio book or, take it in, they really actually have to be at an elevated consciousness to begin with because they're willing to listen to that material.
Right. The first have to be, that's the first step.
Right.
Every journey begins with a step. That first step
Right.
is you want to make a change.
The key word is willingness. You have to be willing. You don't actually have to do it. You say I have to be willing to stop. The willingness now has to convert from this potential energy into something that's a force that actually can make the change. And what I see too often is that people don't start with the right force. And so maybe after a short period of time, they fall backwards on themselves and they back to where they started before they quit.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to do, and I suppose I'm trying to do this more for the mental exercise, is I'm trying to understand that. And what I've come to understand about human beings on my own, because I'm not really a student of this, is that we are, and I'm watching this now with my daughter, who's 12 weeks old. We're creatures of habits. We get into routines. And those habits and routines at first are programmed into us. It's not like the child came out and she knows she wants to be in bed by 6 o'clock and she's going to, ask for milk and love and attention. She becomes a creature of habit, that habits are imposed on her. And so what we have to realize is when we have negative habits, it's not like I'm telling you that you should go back and blame your caregivers or society, but it's actually really important that you recognize that most of the habits that you have at some point were programmed into you. And so,
well, I mean, let me interrupt you, that nobody's born with habits.
Right.
All of your habits have to be programmed.
But it's not as much free will as we think. We are habitually anxious, and that anxiety has a root cause somewhere along the path of our existence, most likely in our childhood. And it all has a causation. And so if you really want to fix a problem, let's say you have a leak in the ceiling, you can't just patch up the ceiling and say, okay, we fixed the leak. You have to figure out where it's leaking from, and you have to fix that problem. Otherwise, the leak will appear somewhere else.
Well, they say that's fixing the cause or fixing the symptom. That's probably the most important thing.
And so I don't, the reason why I don't sell millions of books anywhere is because I don't offer anyone that quick fix. I'm not Weight Watchers. I don't have the 12 laws of success or the key, like you said before, the key to happiness. It's not like that. Really what it is that a person has to be willing to scrutinize and analyze aspects of their personality the way they would if they were looking at their life as if it were a complicated business that in some ways they were trying to improve, or let's say the business wasn't doing well. You have to study your character. You have to study your ways of thinking. You have to study your behavior. and you have to create new goals for yourself, and you have to have viable paths to get to those goals. And then at some point, you have to actually take the first step. And it's always easiest when you're struggling with things in your life to figure out the easiest step you can take instead of one giant big one. Like quitting smoking is one giant step, and you have to either, reach the bottom, had a new spiritual awakening, or you could say, okay, here's how I'm going to get to the place where I'm going to throw out the first pack of cigarettes. And that's what I try to concentrate on, especially when I talk to you. I'm trying to help you lay down easier foundations rather than really, really big ones.
And then but I also think that a lot of it, for most people like myself, there are triggers that put you down a wrong path. And then you need to figure out, like for instance, I know after a bad day or an upsetting call or something that might happen that triggers you negatively, some people say, I need a drink. Some people say I need a cigarette. I say I'm going to go get some ice cream, or I'm going to go order in a cake or something stupid like that.
Or other things happen. You might get depressed for a week.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of things.
The triggers are, it's a misnomer. The triggers were always there. You found a way to avoid them. And what you're avoiding are the fundamental chasms already that are in your psyche. You're not fixing those chasms. And so, of course, that when you have setbacks, they're going to elicit a response.
Right. Well, because it's that a negative trigger happens and you're like, oh, when I eat ice cream or when I smoke a cigarette or when I have a drink, it doesn't bother me as much.
Right.
So that's what you're
by
doing.
the way, it works. And that's the sad part, is that every person becomes addicted to a substance because initially it works.
Right, of course. I agree. That's the problem.
It solves the problem.
If it didn't solve the problem, you wouldn't become addicted to it in the first place.
That's right. So what we have to understand is how we are creatures of habit, and most of the habits that we have, if we're still alive, are actually effective because we're still alive.
Right.
You shower, you bathe, you eat, you brush your teeth.
I don't do any of those things.
Right. Okay. When we don't feel content, when we don't feel safe, when we feel a state of anxiety, it actually is more painful than we realize. Even anxiety. Anxiety, to me, is just the constant vibration of fear for things that may not be real or actually may be impending. Anxiety, to me, is the catalyst for every addiction. What's next is we had to see somebody behaving that way in our society. We learned that overeating. We learned about ice cream. We learned about smoking. We learned about sex addiction. We learned about shopping. We learned about workaholism. We learned about activity. It wasn't just something we invented in our head.
Right.
And so in our need to transcend our pain, we reach for the things that are the easiest to access. It's very hard to achieve mental stability through meditation. It takes a certain intellectual ability, and it actually takes practice. I wouldn't say that that's the go-to for a 15-year-old who grows up in a toxic household. They're not going to say to themselves, gee, I think I'm going to go sit in stillness and really breathe through this, as opposed to what's available to them is alcohol, drugs, tobacco, and specific behaviors. We will always become addicted or habituated to anything that makes us feel good. The problem is where it becomes an addiction is if that thing that we're doing has a side effect that's negative or intoxicating to the body. That's where it's a problem. That's where we have to actually realize that smoking would be perfectly fine if there was no health risks.
Right. I agree with that.
Right.
But what about people that are addicted to working out, where they are constantly at the gym?
It's very good. It's an important question. Here's what I would say. Addiction. The problem with addiction is that it's a colossal distraction. It's very difficult to feel and travel inward and fix your problems if you find distractions. So eventually, being addicted to being in the gym, it's really just keeping busy, constantly moving, trying to prevent the dust from settling, staving off anxiety, pushing back the depression. Certainly, going to the gym is more positive than lighting a cigarette by 1,000 times. But at some point, the levee is going to break.
Right. I agree.
The person's problems are going to break in. You can't train for 16 hours in a day. And what do you do when you have an injury, right? And certainly going to the gym is not going to increase your ability to relate intimately with people. And certainly if you have anxieties and depressions and you're not reaching certain goals. So obviously any addiction, eventually you have to address it and say, okay, what is happening inside of me? What is the source of this? Where does it come from? And I divide that source into two categories. The first category of anxiety is natural to our existence. If everything was perfect in your childhood and you had really a dream life from age 0 to age 20, naturally you'd still have anxieties because the world is a turbulent place. You'd still have to go hunting. You'd still have to gather food. Your grandmother or the village elder is getting old. They're dying. They're going to get sick. You're going to feel anxiety about that. Or you love the community and you feel anxiety about whatever they're suffering with.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a volcano and it's going to erupt. There's anxiety. So anxiety is actually in its pure form, it's one of our survival mechanisms. So that's the first category. The second category of anxiety is a category, I call it the residue anxiety. It's a residue that's left over from events that happen in our childhood that we can't explain, process, or put into perspective.
But what if you had the idyllic childhood? Then you're saying
there's no. I say
in your hypothetical.
Right. Okay. What I've come to realize is that there cannot be an idyllic childhood because we're imperfect creatures. Right? The child it's so complicated from child to child. Some children need more holding than others. Other children might experience jealousy different because of siblings. God forbid your mother passes away from an illness. You have a creepy uncle. You're set up in societies that are competitive. What I've learned is that the human being is a miraculous healing machine, unlike a computer or a car. We're designed with healing capabilities on an emotional and mental level, which means by design, we have a margin of error. You don't have to have a perfect childhood. You can have, I'm just making up numbers because I don't have any science behind this, but let's say your childhood was 75% idyllic. That's enough to be a highly functioning, highly enlightened human being. The problem is that when we look at the symptoms that exist all around humanity, it's more likely that we only have a 25% idyllic childhood and we're coping with 75% garbage. And that's not me just using hyperbole. I really know a lot of people in my lifetime and I examine these things. I can't tell you how many people I know, countless people that I know, come from highly dysfunctional families.
But also I will say this again, because humanity in general is so relative to your upbringing. What you might consider idyllic to someone else might seem abysmal because of how they grew up. So you're always you're not really comparing yourself to someone else. You can always find someone that had a worse or a better childhood than you. There's no way not to.
But there's definitely a baseline because what we can see, I wrote this the other night in my journal. If I was able to study 10,000 children at birth, I guarantee you that every single solitary one of them, there wouldn't be a single exception. All of them would respond to love and affection, to physical touch, to eye contact, to the cooing, the happy smile of mom, and they would respond positive. So what that tells me that inherently the baseline of humanity is good. There would never be a case in history that a child would be born and you slap them and kick them and spit at them and they smile and they go, wow, this is great. Thank God I was born here. So what I understand is that there is a baseline in all of us. And so, yes, there's obviously differences in our personalities. You might be more sensitive than someone else to, let's say, shame. Like your responsibility to shame might be to curl up into a ball and feel intense pain. Another child's response to shame may be to giggle and laugh. There's different response mechanisms because we're all really, really different. But there are certainly things that are exactly the same from human being to human being.
Because of my hilariously small penis, I've learned to accept shame.
Yes, there you go. And so in the talk of self-help, what I've also learned to discover is that anybody listening to this show is likely in a more conscious space than someone who doesn't listen to self-help shows.
Of
That
course.
doesn't mean,
They're also looking for maybe answers, or
right,
looking for guidance.
or they're entertained by this subject. We'll say that
Right.
what we could say is it doesn't necessarily mean that they're in a good place. I'm sure that somewhere out there, and this is not meant to shame anyone, we can't see you. I'm sure there's someone right now lying on a sofa, overweight, shoveling cookies down their throat, trying to figure out how to stop doing that.
That was me about 2 hours ago.
Right. What I've learned is that it's not enough for me to achieve happiness and be content and say, okay, game over. I just got to maintain. What I've learned for myself is that I have to help people. And it's not from a Messiah complex, and it's certainly not from me sublimating any type of guilt or shame. It's just what I've learned is that that's the nature of the human creature, is that we first learn how to love ourselves, and then it's a natural progression that we then learn how to love others. And I think that what I look at for myself and my own growth is that since I grew up in 12-step recovery, and one of the tenets of 12-step recovery is to help another person who suffers, what I've come to learn is that as I get more and more clarity for myself, it's important for me to share it back because of how it keeps coming back to me. And I keep learning more and more as I talk to you. I start to figure out more aspects of my own mind. And the thing that I'm working on now is to really try to figure out a more systematic approach on how to get someone like you to change, as opposed to just being a philosopher. Right. I have to go from philosophy to action.
I do think as I mentioned several times on the show, that what I find that has been the most helpful to me, besides, I think, having the accountability of the show, and I post online a lot about my journey because I think there's an accountability there subconsciously that I think helps. I listen to, I don't know if they're self-help, but educational books as I'm running. And the one, as I said, I'm listening to now, Atomic Habits. It talks about how even the smallest change, if you improve yourself by like 0.5% every day, by the end of a year, you've improved yourself by like 20 times or something crazy like that.
It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
And that's a new generation message, because, when I talk to my dad's 80 years old, and I can see that, his age is starting to now settle in. He's not going to the gym. He's not taking walks. It's clear to me what's going on. I know my dad really well. And so the first thing I learned is that if I want to help my dad, what I have to do is I have to blitz him from all directions with the message. I text your mom, I text his wife, I text my daughter, my sister, and I say to him, do me a favor, text him a positive compliment, an affirmation. David, I love you, you're doing great. Something like that. Make, whatever. Then just say, you need to go for a 10-minute walk. What will happen is the message comes in, and it gets in from all different channels. Somewhere along the line, he's going to wake up and say, I've got to go for a walk. That's how the brainwashing works. Mm-hmm. And usually what happens is he'll think that he came up with that.
That's funny.
So that's one approach. The second approach is I just have to keep calling him and explaining to him how it works. That's where he's at. We're dealing with that type of stubbornness or that type of pervasive I don't have the right word. I'm going to call it disorder, dysfunction, negativity. Like my father's childhood upbringing was horrendous. He's a student of that for most of his life. He understands it on an intellectual level. He's dealt with some of the emotions, but not enough of it. And so he's overwhelmed at 80 years old as his body is starting to decline. He just doesn't know how to actuate this himself. And so to help him, I got to say, Dad, there's a new study. It says all you need is 10 minutes a day of walking. There's no new study.
Right.
It's a bald-faced lie. I have to trick him. There's a new study, Dad.
You better hope he doesn't listen to the show, or he's going to
No, it doesn't. He doesn't. That's the thing, is he doesn't listen to the show, and he should. And so
he told me he does listen, by the way.
So, yeah, we trick him into getting his ass up and walking for 10 minutes, just like you were doing the 2-minute meditations. Right. After a month, 10 minutes. If he won't do a 10-minute walk, he's already dead.
Right. By the way, and also, though, the problem I could tell you that I've seen it with my grandparents, with my father before he passed, and whoever you are in your 50s, 60s, etc., it's just going to get harder in your 80s. So if you're someone who slacks off in your 50s, it's going to be much harder to not slack off in your 80s.
One exception.
What's that?
A rapid expansion of consciousness. You can become, let's, we don't talk about this a lot in the show because it sounds stupid, but I really believe in these micro bursts of enlightenment, because there has to be an equal and opposite reaction in everything in the cosmos. We know what severe mental illness is. I had an acquaintance I know a couple of weeks ago who jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge and perished. When I think about what's going on in his mind, it's the opposite of enlightenment. So I know that enlightenment exists and I experience it. I don't think there's a thing called total enlightenment, like you know everything in the universe. And I also don't think the enlightenment is perfect, because there are realities in the body that drag you back in to the doldrum, to the fight, to the stress, to the frustration, and we deal with them. And so what we try to do in our effort as we get better is shorten the distances between being enlightened and then falling back into the suffering of the mind and the body. And so one of the advantages of being 80 years old is there's greater expansion of consciousness. There's a wisdom that's there. And so if a person hits the right note, the right chord, suddenly all at once, they can be enlightened in a subject that they struggled with their entire life.
There's a term for that. It's called something like, and I'm fucking this up, so I apologize. It's called like the buildup of latent potential. And what I mean by the analogy was given was, imagine in a room that's 27 degrees and there's an ice cube in front of you, right? And then it moves up to 28 degrees and there's an ice cube in front of you. 29 degrees, an ice cube in front of you. When you hit the 32 degrees, that ice cube finally starts to melt. Really, those 1 degree differences meant nothing. But when you finally get to that barrier breakthrough point is when something massive changes.
That's right.
So that's another way of describing
I would say that the stage of life that you're in, if you shift minor systems in your belief system, you're going to have major breakthroughs.
That's what by the way, that's what I couldn't agree with more.
Okay, so here's a few that I would recommend to you. The first one goes back to
If you tell me to pray over my food again.
No, well, you know what? Praying over your food is really just a Band-Aid. It's not really, it's not going to change that much unless you did it for a long time and suddenly you had a breakthrough and you said to yourself, you know something, I realize that when I sit down to eat, I don't really pay enough attention to how unbelievable it is that I live on a planet that provides me with nourishment and sustenance. I take it for granted. And now when I sit and I look at my food and I feel grateful, I'm able to look at other areas of my life that I take for granted. Like, for example, I take for granted these beautiful trees or this magical sunset. And it's been here all the time. It's so common. I forget how great it is. And there's
I'm going to say this. Sorry to interrupt. On my runs lately, I have really, especially in the last few months, as it's gotten nicer out, so appreciative of not only looking at the water, looking at the trees, looking at the beautiful surrounding, but to say, which I say this to myself often, I'm 51. I'm running at this point in my life. I'm still able to, I can run from doing nothing. I can do 10 miles, 9 miles, whatever I'm doing. I don't have any major diseases. All my arms and limbs work. My brain is still pretty, on point. I am super appreciative of all that. I think about that a lot. You don't realize how much better if you just are someone, and I'm not saying that doesn't mean anybody who has any sort of disability can't have happiness, but if you are someone who everything works, and your brain and you're walking around, you don't have any terminal illness, you are light years ahead of other people, and that's right. You need to accept that. But
even a person right now who has 1 day left to live should come to the same conclusion. The gratitude of consciousness, even for that moment. It's to me, when people say, what is the purpose of life? I say, well, which part of life? The physical life? The purpose of the physical life is to live, survive. Obviously, if life has any meaning, the purpose of it is to live, to make it, to survive, right? As long as you possibly can. The purpose of your psychological life is to solve your psychological problems.
You were going to give examples of betterment. You're about to do. Then you got sidetracked. They said when you said I'm going to give you some examples, and I said don't tell me to pray over my food again.
Okay. Well, one of the examples is, I would say, I was going to bring you back to this, is that to me, it's obvious that there's one of two stories that's going on right now in reality. The one of the two stories is that everything is extraordinarily mechanical from the Big Bang and from before that, and it's all just cause and effect, and everything is just happening as a series of chain reactions, and there's no such thing as a divine creator that came before that and said, hey, I'm going to create something. The other possibility is that maybe there is a divine consciousness. Divine not being, I don't mean it as a Woodstocky, LSD kind of mean. I mean divine meaning supreme consciousness above all consciousness that's responsible for the initiation of creation.
Okay.
In either scenarios, I'm not going to figure out the answer with my finite brain, and so I'm not even going to try. So what I focus in on more is the Big Bang for me is the moment of my birth. I went from nothing to something.
Okay.
And so now my life is a constant expansion from a tiny little creature to death. And in that span of time, I want to observe what's going on in my inner world and my outer world. And I want to try to understand. That's the thing.
Creationist theory.
That's just also my entertainment. That's what I enjoy. What I've learned is there's activities that I'll partake in that will distract me and make me uncomfortable and lead me towards madness. And there are activities that I can partake in that will still my mind and make me happy regardless of my external circumstances. And I am experienced enough now to move myself towards the latter. Is that right? Did I say ladder means the last one? I said
the last one, yes.
That's right. So I've learned that in order for me to be at peace, I have to be a peaceful person. I've learned that I have to have a daily practice. It's practice forever. There's no graduation from this stuff. Even the 95-year-old monk who's been sitting in a cave living a perfect life, they still have to practice. So to me, I have to make time every day for this daily practice, which is the contemplation of who I am, what my problems are, how I'm going to solve them, what's my place in this world. I don't have to do this for 12 hours a day. I do it for an hour. I do it for half an hour. And the place for me to do.
Well, I'm going to say in addition to that, and I forget the term for this, so I apologize, but there's a term about, we all believe most people believe they're the center star of the movie that their life is in, right? That's how a lot of people view the world, that everybody else around you are just actors in your movie, right? And there's a name for that, but
narcissism.
Just I forget what it's called. I know it's not Dunning-Kruger. I just forget what it's called. But anyway, a thing that really struck with me on that, what you're just saying about how to react in the reality. The example I give is this: if you're in your car and somebody cuts you off, right? Is your immediate reaction, look at this fucking guy cutting me off, what the fuck's wrong with him? Or is your reaction, I wonder if that guy's late for his kid's high school graduation and he's running late, not paying attention? Because one of them is directly because he wanted to screw you over, and the other one had nothing to do with you. You weren't involved in that at all. So how you perceive the world is really decided by you. How you react to that is on you. And if you get angry and pissed off at some anonymous guy that most likely didn't even realize he was doing it, he's not in that car and goes, watch what I do to this asshole, and pulls in front of you. That's not what 99.99% of the people in the world aren't thinking that. So why do you react the way you do? So that's how you decide, for me, how to get into a more happy place. Because 99% of those decisions in life where you think the outside world is affecting you negatively, you're not even really a part of that equation. You're making it a part of your equation.
You get into happiness by taking action, and you have to be capable of that. The guy that jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge was no longer capable. He couldn't hear anything different. And what I've learned, and this is the truth, is that, and these are almost direct quotes from 12-Step Recovery, is that there are people who are constitutionally incapable. Mm-hmm. They reach a point where whatever healing mechanisms that we're equipped with are just closed for business.
Yeah, it's no
not
longer
working.
firing for whatever
Right.
reason. Yeah,
That's right. And so that's a separate category. That's where intervention comes in. That's where you need to intervene. Other people have to come in and save that person if it's possible. What we're talking about is how do we self-actualize? How do we do this ourselves? And so there's you could read a book that says the 5 laws of success, right? Start with that.
I hate anything, by the way, that's a finite list. Anything with a finite list.
But it's actually compassionate and helpful.
I get it. Look,
right?
I mean, whatever works for you.
Let's start off with the most popular list was the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, I only agree with 3 of those.
Well, I always joke. I say the 10 Commandments of life. There's about 6,000.
Yeah. Right,
it's not just 10. I'm not being blasphemous. But if the guy came down from the mountain with the 6,000 commandments, the audience would have left.
I always think about the Mel Brooks scene, the 15.
Yeah, the 15, and he dropped it and he broke. Yeah. Right. So so obviously there's 12-step recovery and there's the 7 laws of spiritual success, and everything is always quantified. And I actually think that the person writing it actually believes that that's the number. You know,
I also think humans are predestined to respond well to a finite list. That's what I think it is. Yes, also our brain,
because it breaks it down. It makes it simple. Yeah, it's like an alphabet. There's 26 letters in the alphabet. There's no mysteries. You learn the 26. Now you know the alphabet.
We used to have more though.
Right. I think that what I usually say is that those lists are usually just the beginning, and the longer you stay with it and you focus it, the more you find the nuances, or you find, like, I have my own steps to recovery. I don't just follow the 12 steps.
Right, but if it gets you on the path, that's the important thing. By the way, on that, just quick side note, you know when you see like an Old Tavern and it's written "Ye Old Tavern," you see that weird Y, right?
Yes.
It's like it looks like a Y, but it's like got a weird line. That used to be a letter that represented the sound TH. So it's not Ye Old Tavern, it's the Old Tavern.
Wow.
That letter is to represent.
They dropped that letter. The 27 letters in the alphabet weren't good.
We used to have a few more. So that letter got dropped at some point. And that's what that. So when you're saying Ye Old Tavern, you're saying it wrong. It's still the Old Tavern.
That's right. So for people out there listening, saying, what is the first step? What do I do? How do I make my life better? The first step is the willingness, because no action is necessary except a change within your mind. You don't have to do anything. You could be right now, have your fork and knife on the ham, ready to slice it, and you're going to put it in your mouth. If you're willing to stop doing that, there's hope that you could do better. If you're unwilling,
even if you still do it, as long as you put some thought into that,
you have to be. What is the first step to quit smoking? You have to be willing. I talk to people who smoke, and they say, "I love it. I love the taste. I love it. I'm never going to quit." They're not willing.
Right. Of course.
That's okay. No judgment. So the first idea is, the first meditation is the willingness, and the first action when you're willing is to start writing. I am willing to quit. The next action is to figure out the source of power that you have within you that's going to bring you from the willingness to the surrender. And it's a daily practice. And usually where that power comes from for most people is the complete destruction of the lower self. When a person reaches a bottom from a negative behavior, the lower self all at once has been destroyed, and the higher self wakes up and says, nope, we can't do this anymore. We got to stop. It's in that moment that a person is actually self-realized, because it's they themselves, whatever placebo they surround themselves, whatever books they have, it's they themselves that are getting up and stopping that action. And once they stop, they need to create momentum. They have to go in the opposite direction. That's why all the things that work in 12-step recovery are great. You go to meetings, you get a sponsor, you make coffee, you read the big book, you write your inventory, you're a service to others. You have so many activities that you could do that put you into momentum away from the negative behavior. And if you stop that momentum, you're at risk until you're not at risk anymore, until enough years or time has passed by and you truly recover. Recovery, in my opinion, when you're recovered, is when the risk has stopped. In other words, there's no risk of me today drinking alcohol or smoking cigarettes or taking drugs, because I've pushed myself so far away from those behaviors. I don't wake up sometimes with cravings.
Right. That's why I still have not gotten there diet-wise. I still crave things that are bad for me. And I'm working on it, and I'll go a week at a time, 2 weeks at a time, and then go back. And then
because you're not getting to your anxiety, you're not doing the work. If you still have those cravings, and we're not judging good and bad here. What we're saying for you is that you don't like it.
Right. It was also, though, like you said earlier, it has negative ramifications.
That's right.
If I eat ice cream every day,
you don't like it. You don't like it.
I don't like it. True.
Okay.
But besides me not liking it,
right.
I do, and that's the wrong statement. I do enjoy it while I'm eating it.
Well,
if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it.
You don't like the side effect.
Yeah, I wouldn't eat shit because I don't like the way it tastes, but I love the way it tastes, so that I need to move it. So that just want to give you a couple of quick little updates because we don't have too much time to have to leave in a couple of minutes. But so speaking of the diet, although I do feel like I'm eating worlds better, I still tumble back once in a while. I don't know what you're holding, a broken headphone, okay, and a pen. But I'm still doing better. I'm doing the best I can. I do cook more, which I think helps make you eat cleaner because you know what's going into it. You know, I make my own almond milk every week. I make my own juices every week. And I just try. There's certain regimens that I think have helped.
And you kill your own domesticated cats and dogs for your
food.
Well,
they taste delicious. I got to tell you.
Yeah, well, I like it. You're getting closer to nature.
I'm on week 4 now, which is crazy. I upped my running again. If you've been listening to the show, the original goal was to get to a 5K, right? And I went 5K, 10K, 10K, 50K, whatever. I've done a half marathon. But now every week, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I run 4 miles, 7 miles, 10 miles. So basically almost running a marathon a week, which is crazy. And I have not missed a run in I don't know how long. I have not missed a run. Extremely. I ran yesterday in 90-degree weather. I thought I was going to pass out.
And the positive effects of that discipline will last much longer than just your ability to run, because at later stages in your life, you're going to have to dig deep and find other disciplines, and you'll have it.
Right. And it shows like even the fact that, and by the way, when I'm running, I try to talk myself out of it while I'm running. Like I'll be saying, you could just go home. The air conditioning's on. What are you doing? But I just keep going through. And eventually the best feeling in the world, which I wish everybody would focus on with whatever you're struggling with when it comes to working out or diet or anything, that feeling you get after it's done. When I go home after the run and I take a shower and sit on my couch, there's a euphoric feeling of accomplishment that is what I focus on when I really feel like I'm going to quit. I just think, oh, look, when you get back, you get to do that and you're going to feel phenomenal.
Well, it's also there's a lot of physical things that are going on there other than the euphoria or the dumping of adrenaline or the endorphins that people talk about. It's when you're jogging, you're increasing your circulation, you're concentrating on breathing, you're moving a lot of energy around in your body. I don't mean that again in a hippie way. That you obviously realize that you are an incredible field of energy, electrical energy, and the prana of the breath. You're moving that stuff around, and certainly there has to be positive transformations and shifts. And so what I would recommend that you start to do, since we haven't done this in a long time, where I've given you something to do that wasn't stupid like prayer, which I still believe in wholeheartedly, which you haven't adopted for whatever reason, I recommend that you get a notebook and just write on the notebook anxiety and start to write about what that means to you. What are you anxious over? And try to keep going back deeper and deeper into your history. Look into the layers below what are very conscious. What was your first anxious feeling? Fear, anxiety. Define anxiety as a vibration, probably on a lower level than directly what fear is. Fear is really strong. It's intense. There's something happening. Anxiety probably is the
I think anxiety is the precursor to fear. Like
it's the anticipation of fear, but it because of its frequency, it can stay like that forever. You can be in an anxious state. I wake up sometimes, like last night, my dreams were crazy. Can
I tell you quickly? And I had a dream last night, which is such a weird dream. It has nothing to do with anything, but it's just so weird. My brother and I are in the city, which my brother lives in Miami right now, but we're in the city, and 3 guys pull up next to us, like not pull up, but walk next to us on a street corner, and it's Belle Biv DeVoe from the old group Belle Biv DeVoe, right? And they go, hey, Ralph and Joey. And we're like, how do you know us? And they go, we went to elementary school together. You don't remember? And we don't remember that we went to elementary school with Belle Biv DeVoe. And then at the end of my dream, we're on stage with Belle Biv DeVoe doing all the coordinated dances, singing Do Me Baby by Belle Biv DeVoe. I don't know where the hell it came from.
Well, it's
but that
in
was
your,
my dream last night.
it's obvious where all that stuff comes from. You know, it's in your memory banks, right? And so the dream world is fascinating. So last night, my dreams were just crazy. They were just all over the place. I can't even recount some of the wild events that were happening in my dreams. I had a perfectly good day yesterday. I had a perfectly good sleep. I ate well, whatever. My life was perfectly okay. I woke up this morning and I couldn't keep my eyes closed, and I couldn't run through my normal waking exercises. Before I open my eyes, I just flood my mind with positivity. It's very deliberate. I couldn't do it. I had to open my eyes right away. And I said, man, you feel anxious. You just feel anxious. And I said, shit, where the hell did this all come from? And so what I realized, I just had to lay in bed. Sorry, I was laying on my back in the bed. And I said, try to see where the anxiety is coming from. And I was able to trace it to 4 or 5 events in the day before, and my reactions to that, and my concerns, and the things that I have going on in my life. And then what I had to do was, before I really got up and got going, is I had to say to myself, none of that stuff matters. It's just shit that I'm doing. It's stuff that I am working on, but none of it actually matters. It's not really that important. It's all just activity. And that actually just relaxed me. But no matter what, for the rest of this day so far, I haven't been happy, joyous, and free. And I wouldn't say I'm in an enlightened state of mind right now. I'm in a neutral state of mind. And I say, wow, this is weird, because there's just some days that are like this. They're just very dry, or they're dull, or there's a little bit of something going on. But it's my responsibility to make sure that this doesn't get out of control. I can't just leave this behind. I have to do something. I have to go for a long walk, or think about, am I anxious because I'm not fulfilling my duties? Am I neglecting my wife? Am I not taking care of something that I need to with my children? And I realized another big source of my anxiety today was that our 12-week-old has a little bit of 12-week-old has a cold. Okay. And I was thinking about it. I closed my eyes and I said, I have so much compassion for her. I don't want her to suffer. And I want to protect her from everything. And I felt as though what I wanted to do was, I just want to be home with her, and I want to be loving her, and I want to be stroking her face, or giving her a kiss, or helping her to sleep. And I feel like my work and my efforts keep me away. And that was creating anxiety for me. And so the benefit of that exercise was, I got to the root of my anxiety. And by doing that now, I'm able to put up a mirror in my mind and be a grown-up and talk to myself. That's my process.
Are you saying that I'm not really going to be singing on stage with Belle Biv DeVoe?
I'm saying that your dreams first of all, in your dream, you are Belle. How do you say the name?
Belle Biv DeVoe. No, I wasn't. Joey and I they asked.
No, you are. You are in your dream. Your every character and every object is a representation of you, because you're creating it in your mind.
Okay, I don't know if that maybe. Yeah.
Not sure. Maybe. Come on, man. Don't you read Freud and Jung and all those guys?
No. The last thing I'm going to say is this, because then we got to wrap. I got several emails. I keep saying emails, but DMs from people that did not like this, so I did feel to address it with you. They felt it was not right to not bring back Gary Taubes to discuss the stuff that you did with Dr. Mechanic.
Right.
So there should be an episode where they're both on, because it's not fair to not let him defend his argument.
I love the audience. I appreciate everything. I'm going to veto that and say I've had enough of that. If you guys want to do that without me, I do not want to engage anymore in the quackery of that stuff. I think we're giving it way too much airtime. You know, first of all, the show really just can't center around diet. I would say with that episode with Taubes, I was really prepared. I knew that this guy was going to talk about keto, which to me is like somebody just talking about the most moronic philosophy in the world. And I feel threatened in that conversation, because what he teaches perpetuates sickness. And I said that. And so the only reason why I brought Mechanic on was because I want the guest to know, the listener to know, that I'm not just making up the argument. It's actually a pervasive debate within the scientific community. And you're not going to find people with a deep knowledge of this stuff who actually work in disease and help people with it that go, yeah, let's get people on a high protein, high fat, or meat, and take them away from all these wholesome foods.
Right.
It's just nonsense.
The only thing I would say about it, and to put a button on it, which is really, you've said this before too, anything you do that starts to restrict calories, you're going to see results. Whether it's positive in the long run is not what I'm debating. But if you all of a sudden, like there was a guy that did this where he only ate 1,800 calories a day, but all he ate was Twinkies. And over the course of 3 months, he lost a lot of weight and blah, blah, blah. All these things started happening. Great. That guy will be dead in a year. But in the beginning, you will see positive.
Extremely intoxicate the body and also the consciousness. You can't feel mentally acute.
Right. I'm just saying. So that's what I think, buddy. That's what we're at, is that we're on the same page with that. So I do think if you're doing anything, and I say this to everybody with terms of working out and too, if you can stick with something and it's giving you positive results in the beginning, it might be the first step you need to get to a better place.
Or it might be the thing that sinks you into a bottom.
It might be. You don't know.
You know, I don't think that I've never met anybody that, you know, and I'm in the business. I rarely meet people that back out of stupid dietary choices. You know, keto people, paleo people. You know, I'm not. Who cares about who they are? I'm just talking about the actual diet. It's erroneous. It's not the truth. And,
I'm not denying that, but I'm saying
whatever. If you want to get healthy, no, you can't say it's okay. If rape and murder is a catalyst for your recovery,
but you're not hurting anybody. I'm saying is that look, what I'm saying
yourself.
is this.
By the way, that's not true. You're killing animals. You're hurting something.
That's an ethical debate. That's a different.
Well,
debate.
It's what else is there? What are we here? We're supposed to be an ethical bunch of guys talking about psychology and self-help and improvement. The last argument on keto is that you have to be nonstop a murderous person living in an ocean of blood so that you could lose 50 pounds. That's not sustainable either.
Okay, fair enough. All right, look, follow me.
You know what? You turned me into an asshole at the end of the show.
Love it.
And so, I don't like it. I'm just talking from a chemical perspective.
Okay.
Those diets suck.
Fair enough. That seems really, you lose me when you get so scientific like that. Follow me everywhere at I Am Ralph Sutton. My other show, the SDR Show. We had some great episodes lately. We just had the guy from Bad Company, from Def Leppard. Some really cool shows on there. Follow me over at I Am Ralph Sutton for all my links and everything else like that. And Mark, is anything you want to plug? Usually, no.
I have a lot to plug now. I am plugging self-help.
Wow. Way to end the show. We'll see you next week on the Good Sugar Podcast.